Welcome to what I'm calling the 2024 retrospective video. So this is going to follow a style similar to the podcast video I uploaded earlier this month. So it'll be a sort of balance between scripted and conversational. So I've got some parts written out, other parts are just bullet points I'll kind of just give my thoughts on. So this is the first time I've done anything like this. You might be thinking, why now? So I started this channel back in May of 2022, which, I mean, 2.5 years ago. That has gone insanely quick. And it's even just saying that feels weird. The first series I ever did was a brief history of Ukraine, which I first began working on pretty much straight after Russia launched its invasion back in February of that year. And then the series took me then till the end of the year to finish, and a lot changed over just that short period. Well, I say short, but, you know, relatively speaking. And 2023 after that was an eventful year in so many ways, but 2024 honestly tops anything that 2023 brought, which brings us to the present moment. If you're a long-term viewer of my channel, or not even just long-term, if you're a viewer of my channel, I can assume that you at least have some interest in international events and history. And 2024 has been an insane year, both in that vein and personally. So just a few weeks ago, as of recording this, Bashar al-Assad's regime has fallen in Syria, and you know, his family have ruled the country since 1971, so this is the end pretty much of an era. And there's a genuine chance that the war in Ukraine next year will either end or at least become frozen. So in general, there's a lot of uncertainty right now over politics, economics, pretty much everything. And that's why I'm making this video, both as a reflection of my own thoughts for the year and also kind of to update you guys on some plans I've got for the channel for 2025. So, Ukraine. I mean, obviously, Ukraine had to be in this video. It's my channel we're talking about. At least half of my content, I want to say, is Ukraine related in some shape or form. So it's safe to say I'm a bit of a Ukraine fanatic. But so I first got interested in everything relating to Ukraine back in December 2021. So I read Serhiy Plokhy's Lost Kingdom, which explores the history of Russia. But the part of it that really caught my attention was the prediction that something would have to happen between Ukraine and Russia. But I read that at a time when tensions between the two were escalating very quickly, very visibly. You know, there'd be something in the news almost every day relating to it. And when February came, I was genuinely shocked. I mean, after that, Plokhy's book felt almost prophetic in a way. And at that time, I was in the first year of my degree at university. I've been a massive history buff all my life, and to see stuff that you read about in books kind of happen before you is weirdly fascinating, but also terrifying. And to witness now what is the largest conflict in Europe since, well, the Second World War is still bizarre. So, you know, what motivated me to make a video on it? So, I mean, I've been interested in YouTube going back to pre-COVID. You know, I had one of those shitty Minecraft Let's Play channels that every teenager had. But then I decided why not sort of, you know, combine that love of YouTube with history. You know, I'd followed the big history channels like History Matters, Great War, World War II in real time. They're amazing, by the way. Definitely recommend them. So I felt like I had a decent idea of how to make videos, kind of, you know. And then I released my first proper video, which was an experience. I mean, I wouldn't say it's great, but I mean, it's not shit for a first video. My microphone quality is garbage, but, you know, I guess if you can make out what I'm saying, that's kind of good enough. But yeah, once I'd finished with the History of Ukraine series, I then started making more sort of topical videos on Ukraine throughout 2023, so the summer counteroffensive was a big one. There was a lot of hype surrounding it. The news played it up a lot, you know. People thought the Ukrainian army would definitely kick the Russians out, you know. They'd be chilling in Crimea by the end of the year. And in hindsight, no, not really. And, you know, by the end of the year, the fronts had pretty much entered a stalemate. And then over the course of this year, Russia has gradually sort of made pace in the east. You know, they've gradually been taking more and more land. They've been turning this into a war of attrition, which honestly, Ukraine is not suited to fight, which brings us to sort of what the West is doing. That is to say, not much at this stage. It's been incredibly frustrating to kind of just watch the West falter with their support to Ukraine. You know, before that, at least aid had been kind of trickled to Ukraine, but even then that wasn't enough. But now they're barely doing anything. You know, just a couple months ago, there was news that North Korean troops were being sent to Ukraine. This is crazy. Like, North Korean soldiers are fighting against the Ukrainians, and the West has done absolutely nothing about it. You know, there's been minimal sort of talk, you know, aside from the sort of usual empty rhetoric that you get from NATO politicians. And then, I mean, obviously, you know, you can bring up the argument of red lines and escalation and blah, blah, blah. And I know it's easy to say with hindsight that the West should have sent weapons like tanks and missiles straight away, you know, when Russia first invaded Ukraine. But even if they'd been sent, 6 months earlier, Ukraine would be in a far better position they are in now. And with Trump's plan to end the war in 24 hours, which sounds even more stupid when I say it out loud than when I think it, it's likely that the war's going to become radically different for what it was before. So personally, I don't think that the war's going to end anytime soon. But what seems likely is that the front lines will become frozen. So both Russia and Ukraine will then have to try and recoup their losses, and the war might restart in the future. So from my humble armchair, or I guess swivel chair position, I think it's likely that Ukraine will have to accept Russia's de facto control over the territory that it controls. But it's not going to officially recognize it. So, if peacekeepers become part of the deal, that's unclear at the point of making this video. There has been some talk of European leaders, but at the moment, that's, again, just rhetoric. If they do become involved, I imagine it's going to be to serve as a stopgap for Ukraine's accession to NATO, which, again, depending on what sort of settlement is hashed out, may or may not be on the table for Ukraine. Although I don't see Ukraine giving up, the ability to join NATO, as that's one of the things they've been fighting for this entire time. I mean, again, this is all just my opinion. I'm not an expert by any means. I'm just a guy that's interested in this stuff way too much. And I can't really comment much more on anything that will happen over the next 6 months, year, which, then brings us to Syria. So, I mean, the Syrian Civil War before, what happened this month was just one of those conflicts I kind of grew up with. It felt like one of those things that would just never end. So when the HST launched its, lightning offensive across Syria at the start of December and al-Assad was overthrown, I was genuinely reading it. I was like, what the fuck is happening? In the span of about a week, a regime that had ruled Syria for well over half a century is just gone like that. I mean, obviously Syria is far from stable at the moment. You've got the Kurds in the northeast, you've got the Turks, you've got Israel now kind of fanning out from the Golan Heights. Yeah, I think it's safe to say that the civil war is far from over, but there is definitely a sort of sense of normalcy now that's kind of crept in. And obviously, again, this kind of relates to Russia. They've got the Tartus naval base along the Syrian coast. Well, that's their only foothold in the Eastern Mediterranean. And I mean, losing that isn't exactly a good look if you want to maintain your status as a global power. But it will be interesting to see kind of what political direction Syria goes in. Kind of a completely different matter to see whether the leadership kind of sticks to what they've promised, in terms of liberal reforms, minority representation, that sort of stuff. Events that are pretty much in the balance. So the events in South Korea were weird. To be honest, I don't really know what other words to use. I'm not an expert on South Korean politics by any means, but it doesn't seem to be the smartest idea to declare martial law with no legal backing in a democracy and then somehow expect to remain in power afterwards. Fuck knows, but I followed that entire thing as it happened, and it felt like I was living in an episode of The Twilight Zone. Honestly, I couldn't believe some of the stuff I was reading. So now the South Korean president is being impeached, and this entire thing seems completely pointless. I mean, at least from a rational perspective. I mean, the parliament lifted martial law after 6 hours, and now the guy is losing his political position. So congrats, I guess. Honestly, even just talking about it kind of pisses me off and just how stupid it is. Which then brings us to Europe, which, I mean, one of the geopolitical entities of all time. The far right continues to be a prominent political force in almost every nation now. The news has focused a lot on Romania and Germany recently. So in Romania's case, they had their presidential election earlier this month, which was cancelled, due to accusations levied against one of the candidates called Georgescu, who apparently was using Russian-financed bot TikTok accounts to try and get people to vote for him en masse, which is a pretty typical page out of the Russian hybrid warfare playbook. In Germany's case, the AfD is slowly entrenching itself, especially with the horrible thing that happened in Magdeburg the other day. 2025 is going to be a pivotal year in politics, not only just in Europe, but, across the world. Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it for Europe. It's a fucking dumpster fire, just like UK's politics at the moment, but I'm not touching that garbage heap either. Which, finally, outside of all the geopolitics and all that stuff, brings me to some channel updates. As we slowly creep towards 450 subs, which, I mean, let me just say, that's an insane number. That's 450 people that sit and willingly listen to me talk about history. Yeah, so, for those 450 people, I've got some plans in the works for next year. So firstly, there's going to be some channel rebranding, just a few changes here and there. I'm not going to be changing my name. It's going to be Iravic for the foreseeable future, so you can rest easy in that regard. And if you've been a long-time viewer of my channel, the vast majority of my videos have been sort of fully scripted videos on narrative history, you know, with maps and all that stuff. But in the last 6 months, I've experimented with video essays, so relating different historical concepts to some of my favorite films and TV shows. I've really enjoyed making them, so expect those to continue into next year. In terms of the Ripples of History podcast, I am pleasantly surprised that over 300 of you actually decided to watch it. Like, this was just something that me and my mate threw together in the span of a single day, thinking, fuck it, why not do a podcast? But based on what I've seen, you guys liked watching it, I enjoyed making it, so why not do more of that? And it's also incredibly easy to edit, so I'll be able to get them out theoretically on the same day that I record them, which then kind of brings me over to scheduling. So again, if you've been a long-term viewer of my channel, I've made statements pretty much left, right, and center about sticking to a certain schedule, whether that's one video a month, one every 2 weeks, you know, one every week, whatever. I'm in my 3rd year of university, so making the sorts of videos that I used to make is quite difficult. So take a 10-minute narrative history video, for example, that can take me upwards of about 20 hours to make. So, you know, if you account for the time that it takes to write the script, edit it, record it, do the actual video editing itself, and then the sort of thumbnail design, that all takes a huge amount of time. So it's for that reason that I'm not sticking to any particular schedule from now on. I will generally try and aim to upload something every month, whether that's a podcast episode, one of my usual videos, or something else. But for the sake of not leaving you guys on hold, I'm not going to commit to anything solid at the moment. Overall, this has been a massive year for the channel, both in terms of growth and the quality of the videos I've made. You know, I read every single comment that you guys leave, and it is genuinely lovely to see people watch my stuff and like it. So, you know, thank you all so much. I've got a lot of stuff planned for 2025. I've got a bunch of video ideas in the works and a lot of other big stuff, so do stay tuned. And, you know, wherever you are in the world right now, I hope that you're enjoying the last couple of days of this year. And it'll be interesting to see what 2025 brings us. As always, I've been Iravic, and I'll see you in the new year.